And thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. Now, scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, I want for you to be fired up about our guest, Douglas King. He is the author of the book, An Innocent World. Now, you know what I'm going to tell you. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee, or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Douglas. Thank you so much for joining us here on Daily Spark.
Thank you for letting me join you too. Thank you.
Now, I want to definitely talk about your book. You have such an interesting title, and I can't wait to delve into that. But I usually like to introduce my authors to my guests first. Now, I know that there are thousands of folks out there who already know who you are and know about your book. But perhaps we have a few people who this might be the first time they've heard about you or your book. If you would, please. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What makes Douglas Douglas?
Well, life experience mostly. However, there were two events in my life that helped me become the person I am today. The first was being saved by Jesus. It was singularly the most satisfying encounter in my entire life. It changed the direction of my life. Not right away, but eventually. The second event that contributed to make me me is the third and last time I attempted to get off antidepressants. You see, I have clinical depression and I need antidepressants to function. Having been recently saved, I saw this as an opportunity to finally be able to rid myself of antidepressants, and I was counting on Jesus to help me do that. I did manage to stay off antidepressants for over a year, but not without a cost. I became increasingly anxious over that period and eventually reached a point where I couldn't sleep. But I kept believing that Jesus would save me. Finally, after attempting suicide, I ended up in the hospital where I was put back on antidepressants, but with a conviction that I would never try that again. I refer to this time in my life as my year in hell. It was the toughest thing I'd ever done. I was full of regret, though, not only for having failed in my attempt to stay off antidepressants, but also for not giving myself completely over to the will of Jesus. Okay. I felt that if I'd just done that, given my will over to Jesus, I would have been saved and able to successfully stay off antidepressants. But while I was back on antidepressants, I was feeling a lot of emotional pain. It was a really bad time. That is, until one day I realized something about myself, that giving up my will over to Jesus was just not who I was. This coming face to face with who I was gave me self-respect. I finally felt I knew myself. In a sense, Jesus did save me. After all.
Now, being an author, is that something that you've always wanted to do, or did you find that it was just the next logical step along your life path?
I think it was more like a logical step. I'd never really considered myself a writer of any, I didn't set out to be a writer from a young age or anything. It was, once I retired, though, I thought, well, gee, wouldn't it be nice to write a book? And originally I started to write a book more or less about my life, but then I got into this book itself, and that's where it started.
Now, when you were in the process of writing An Innocent World, did you find that the title came to you first and you kind of wrote your book around the title? Did the themes, the topics, the characters come to you first and you just felt compelled to write the story and you would figure out the title later? How did you come about the title?
That was something of a process. I was into the book, I was writing it, and it occurred to me I would have a title. I knew that, but I had various choices, but all revolved around the word innocent, okay, because that was the main focus of my book. And I had various titles in mind, and I settled on this one, An Innocent World. So I was already writing before I decided to come up with a title.
Mm-hmm. Now, I like that you mentioned that no matter what working title you had, it all kind of focused around the word innocent. Why did you choose that particular theme? Why do you feel that kept coming up, that was pulling at you?
Well, the book focuses between the idea of evil and good, okay, guilty and innocent, and it began, of course, with the biblical story of the Garden of Eden, and I began to picture a world of innocence, people who who are not sinful, don't have any evil intent, and I began to build a world of an ideal world of that sort. So definitely innocent and guilty were words that I was already dealing with in my book, and it just seemed a natural outcome to title the book that way.
Now, I like this path that you're going down. The good versus evil, the Garden of Eden, the start of what we understand to be our world today. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Now, I understand, and listeners, you know what I'm going to say. He can't tell it all. You're going to have to purchase the book to get the juicy details. But can you tell us a little bit more about that? That's quite interesting.
Okay, well, the book began actually with a question that had been bothering me for some time, and in fact, it's been a question that has been literally staring us in the face for the past 3,000 years. And the question was, what was the tree of life, the tree that gives immortal life, doing in the Garden of Eden if Adam and Eve were already immortal? It seemed to me kind of a contradiction. Why would you have a tree that gives you immortal life if you're already immortal? You know. So my book began from that, answering that question, and I came up with about 22 separate major conclusions, and they're listed in the book, in the back of the book. But some of them were, some of the conclusions I came to was that the biblical story of the fall of man is in fact not true. That may be a bit of a stunner for some people to accept. The devil does not exist. Evil does not originate in us. It does not come from within us. It comes through the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That is the tree that actually we derive evil from. And God has in fact felt evil, as we do, at some point. And we are not alone in the universe, and we have lived past lives. So there are several conclusions that I came to in writing this book, and it's all logically based. It's not fanciful or, it is to a certain extent imaginary, because I try to visualize what things are in this innocent world, how they operate and how they function, and indeed how they compare to our world, which I have titled The World of the Guilty. That's just who we are.
So did you have a particular moment in your life that you felt, I need to complete this book. It is important that this work get out. What inspired you to continue to move forward in the writing of An Innocent World?
Well, what inspired me initially to write the book was dogs. I'm retired, and after I retired, I moved in with my daughter, who operates a dog walking daycare business. So I had an opportunity to work with dogs, and I found that dogs exhibit a behavior that was not, it's kind of a critical to say, but dogs actually exhibit innocent behavior towards themselves and us, and it was something that I wasn't used to seeing. So that was the main trigger to get me to write a book about innocent people, because I had a view of what innocence looks like. It's kind of hard to describe, but dogs have that ability, and I began to build a book around that idea. It's funny because dogs have behaviors that are not how people behave. So I had this contrast between dog behavior, innocent behavior, and what people are capable of, or at least as far as I view it. And so that's where the book began. I began to build a book logically to emphasize that innocent behavior in humans, so that I could transfer that type of behavior to human being, see how they behave and how their world would be built from that.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long did it take you to write your book? What was your process? So many people say, I wrote it in, and I was able to write it within 2 months. Other people that I've interviewed have said it's taken as long as 20 years because it was just a series of things that have gone on in their lives. How long did it take for you to, from first page to last page, how long was that process for you?
Okay, well, I started in October 2016, and it's now 2020, so it took me almost 4 years to write. It's not a big book. It's 160 pages long, but I built it, I designed it, and I wrote it based on logic, and like I said before. And while writing it, though, the book began to feel like a message from God, and that I had to get it right, so I spent a lot of time perfecting it and getting the exact message out there. And I'm not someone who likes to talk a lot, so what I'm doing now is unusual for me. But I tend to condense my communications to the essentials to get the idea across. This brevity is reflected in my writing. There's a lot of information in my book, relatively few pages. So the reader may at times feel out of breath, figuratively. I know I do when I read the book, particularly if I hadn't read it for a long time. I feel like there's a lot of stuff in there, and sometimes the reader will need to take a break and think about what he's read, particularly if he wants to confirm the validity of my train of logic.
Mm-hmm. So would you suggest that the reader, once they've purchased a copy, that they read it from cover to cover as opposed to simply opening up the book and starting with chapter next?
I would approach it from the point of view of reading it all the way through, but only take as much as, or only read as much as you want to take at the time, because like I said, there's a lot of information there and a lot of things to try and visualize and understand, because after all, you remember, I'm building a world, an entire planet of behaviors and philosophies and societies and things like that. So there's a lot of detail to think about. So I would just read it until you feel that you want to put it down and think about what you've read, and then pick it up again. You don't have to read a chapter and then another chapter and so forth. So chapters are not long. Like I said, the book is only 160 pages long. But the chapters deal with segments of innocent world society, so that you can focus on a particular aspect of the society if you want, and just try to understand that, and then move on to the next chapter, which focuses on a different aspect, and so forth. It's not like a plot story or fiction story where you go from one event to the next event and so on, building a climax and so forth. I would say if you wanted to indicate a climactic chapter, that would be the one on. It's just, I don't title my chapters by number; they're just titles, and it would be the central chapter, which is entitled "Innocent or Guilty," and that's the pivotal chapter that turns the book from one direction to another. Like, it focuses more on the religious aspects rather than the physical world type aspects or that sort of thing. So it's really the crux of the book.
Douglas, it is time for us to go to break, but before we do, if you could please, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how can we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the title of the book is An Innocent World, and you can get it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indigo. You can reach me at my email address, which is Douglas A. King the First at gmail.com.
We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. I am trying to enlighten you today. I want to inspire you today, and I hope that we can definitely empower you today. My guest is author Douglas King, and we're talking about his book, An Innocent World. You know, Douglas, you mentioned before that you were looking at the dogs. To represent an innocent sense of behavior. Besides the dogs and their innocent behavior, was there any other person who perhaps inspired you to write the book?
Yes, my ex-wife, Marion, though she didn't directly inspire me to write the book, she did inspire me to use logic while writing it. My use of logic is essential to the 22 major conclusions that I arrived at. My dedication to logic stemmed from an incident that occurred some years ago when our daughter was attending high school. Our daughter was being bullied in the school, and Mary and I decided to confront someone about it at an upcoming parent-teacher conference. Fortunately, we were able to meet the principal of the school. However, when we broached the subject, the principal became upset and very defensive. It was obviously a subject that was emotionally charged for him. The thing I noticed was Mary's reaction. The more defensive and angry the principal got, the colder and more logical Marion became. It's like watching a wild animal on one end of the conversation and a cool, calm, collected trainer on the other. I was kind of impressed, and I told her so later. I was so impressed by her behavior that I have adopted it as my go-to behavior when dealing with people, particularly when I find myself in an argument. It has worked well. I found that people tend to calm down when I don't buy into their emotionality. I continue to apply logic in my life. Though it may sound mundane to some people, using logic in my everyday life is rewarding. It helps me to stay on the right path.
Now, in your book, you describe a world inhabited by what you call the innocents. Can you tell us how you have done that? How were you able to continue that theme along?
Okay, well, I use a montage approach to describe this world of the innocent. For example, I take certain physical attributes of the world, such as agriculture, environment, race, population, etc., as well as more psychological aspects, such as family, politics, alcohol and drugs, science and technology, and medical, and so forth, and show the differences that exist between our world of guilty and that of the innocent. This innocent world represents the ideal of what our world could be. So that's how I've done it.
Now, why was it important for you to include the aspects that you did? Why was it important to make that comparison and the contrast with those particular details, as opposed to if you have 3 in a list, as opposed to perhaps 7 things on the list? Why was that important?
Okay, well, it was used. I used a comparison to emphasize the difference between our world and this imaginary world, innocent world. It was also to show how much more superior, I guess, for lack of another better word, the innocent world is compared to ours. Ours seems to be headed down a path of destruction, whereas the innocent world is, continuing quite well from the way I've been able to imagine it.
With that being said, your book takes a look at, as you mentioned, in the last segment, if you will, a comparison or a look at good versus evil or good and evil. Does that mean that the innocents believe in God? They believe in a higher power? Or is that something that's not necessarily included in their world?
Okay, well, there's every reason to think that most innocents would believe in God. Our belief in God seems to be a default characteristic of who we are. Atheism, or non-belief in God, seems to be the result of trauma. or become convinced that God is not there to help us. Excuse me. Mm-hmm. Like our world, some innocents could become atheists. That would be the result of trauma again. Since there's still accidents and natural disasters, it's not a paradise. It's a world basically without evil. Everything else is the same. It's just doesn't have the evil aspect. However, in the innocent world, there is no need for a savior like Jesus, since there is no sin to forgive. Remember, all innocent, and they have no sin.
Now, you stated that one of your conclusions is that God himself or herself has felt what we would refer to as evil in the last segment. What did you mean by that? But before, if we could take a step out, if you could explain to us what is your definition first of the word evil, and then explain to us how you came to the conclusion whether or not God has felt this evil.
Well, in my book, I actually defined evil and good and right and wrong. Evil, I'll have to start back here. I defined right and wrong first, and then from that I defined evil and good. Now, right is either intentionally or unintentionally doing something for positive for someone else. Okay, and bad would be intentionally, unintentionally doing something detrimental to someone else. So, right is doing something positive for someone, and wrong is doing something detrimental to someone. Where evil is intending to do wrong to someone, and good would be intending to do positive or right for someone. So that's where my definition of evil comes from. It's basically the tenet or the belief that you're doing something positive for someone else, not necessarily for yourself, but for someone else. Okay. So that's where I get the differences. That's how I define the difference between evil and good.
Now, you came to the conclusion that God has felt evil. Can you expound on that as well?
Okay. Adam and Eve, by eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, gained the understanding and the experience of the feeling of being good, as well as the feeling of being evil. Okay. God said that Adam and Eve would be like him, that they're knowing good and evil, and that they live forever. Then God is not innocent, and thus must have experienced the feeling of being evil at some point. That was not to say that God was evil, just that he felt evil. There's a crucial difference. Now, I should reiterate about the difference between evil and good, or good and evil. I want to emphasize that evil is something that doesn't originate within us. Okay, it's an intent to cause harm or detriment to another individual, whereas good, like I said before, is an intent to cause positive results or positive effect on another individual. Okay, and right and wrong are two aspects of behavior that are defined within a society. Okay, you can say when you do right, you're actually having a positive influence on someone else, and wrong would be having a negative influence on someone else. Now, society will emphasize what is right in your behavior and what is good. So it's not a question of interpretation. It's an agreed upon behavior. Okay, whereas good and evil, are not defined within society's rules. It's actually comes from the tree of good and evil, not from society.
Now, so many times for an author they want to make sure that there is a particular message or nuggets of wisdom, if you will, that they choose to scatter along the way from page 1 to page last in their book. For you, what would you like for the reader to take away from the book, having completely read the book? Is there any one message, or are there any bits of wisdom that you want to make sure that they grasp along the way?
Okay, well, there's three things that I would like the readers to get out of the book that are essential to what's inside and what's in there. One is apply logic to your lives. The other is to get saved. And the third is to commit to a new commandment: do no harm to another. Okay, that is basically, that's, something that carries through the whole book. Okay, do no harm to another. This is all what innocents have foremost in their minds and their behavior, is to do no harm to another. Okay, that's the whole basis of behavior. And if you can do these things, you'll be brought closer to God. And that's explained in the book, how that happens, that you become closer to God if you do those three things, particularly if you do no harm to another. And it's a matter of building character, becoming tougher in your psychology of behavior, so that you're able to confront and deal with or confront God in His power and His magnificence. It's not something that an ordinary human can deal with or confront. The Jews at Mount Sinai could not face God. They had to get Moses to do that for them. He was their front man. And we humans can't do it either. In fact, God said that if you saw me as I was, you would die.
So with your directive of do no harm, are you encouraging then people to not only live according to the Ten Commandments and that being a basic instruction, and taking the Beatitudes and using that as a basic instruction, and various other scripture along the way that guide you for how you should have the heart of God, or have the mind of Christ, and how to view each other with an agape sense of love? Are you saying that the do no harm is kind of a bringing together of all of those scriptures into just one centric way of thinking, and that is, let's return to our most innocent self and do no harm to another?
Okay, now, as I mentioned, the commandment, or the statement, do no harm to another, is essential to innocent behavior. That is not to say that, in fact, the innocents don't require the Ten Commandments. Their behavior does not require that God draw up a list of rules of behavior, because their behaviors are not evil in any way. They're innocent, so there's no rules to abide by. But currently, we assuage the focus of do no harm to another is to not focus, but to provide a safe and environment for all of us to live, that we don't fear any evil happening or occurring on us. But it does open us up to increasing our suffering. Now, suffering is something that's essential to building our character, building a strength of character that will enable us to confront God, enable us to basically exist in the same space as He does. And that is also an essential message in my book, too, that suffering is what builds character. And God is there to help us with that, so that eventually we can be with Him. Now, currently, we assuage our suffering by exacting revenge on those who have wronged us. But when they in turn get revenge on us, our suffering increases again. It is seemingly a never-ending cycle of revenge and counter-revenge. This cycle increases the overall suffering in the world without getting us any closer to God. We need to stop that cycle. By not allowing ourselves to seek justice or to obtain retribution or to get even, or whatever euphemism we're using these days to describe getting revenge, we will increase our suffering when we no longer have that outlet. But by resisting the impulse to get revenge, we have an opportunity to build strong character, the kind of character that God is looking for. This new commandment is something that we should have been following all along. We could have been with Almighty God long ago. Now, from this book, the underlying message is that we are going to eventually become innocent if we obey this commandment, and in so doing become spiritually godlike, so that we are able to exist in the same space as God, right? So that we have the character, we have the strength of will to be able to basically enter his inner chamber, of a select few of individuals that can exist with God and help him with his tasks, whatever he has to do with the universe.
Well, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, Douglas, if you could please, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book, where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the title of the book is An Innocent World, and it's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Indigo. Also, you can look for it on my website, aninnocentworld.com. You can contact me at my email address, Douglas A. King the First. It's all words, or one word rather, at gmail.com.
I love it. Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.
Discovery. No, just a sec.
What would it look like if we listened more? Could the right voice, the right set of words, bring us all just a little closer? Get us to open up, even push us further? It could, if we took the time to listen. The most inspiring minds, the most compelling stories. Download Audible and listen for a change.
Hi everyone, Dr. Angela here. Did you know that Daily Spark is now on Facebook? That's right, you can visit with me at facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I want to know more about what you're thinking. I'd love to know which interview did you find the most entertaining or the most informative. I want to talk to you, and I want you to be able to talk to me. Simply visit facebook.com/Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
And we are back. Thank you so much for spending time with me here on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I hope that you are enjoying your time with us today. My guest is author Douglas King, and we're talking about his book, An Innocent World. Now, Douglas, thank you so much for spending time with me and talking about your book, but I would like to shift gears just a little. One of the things I like to do is to share the wisdom of a published author with those who are an aspiring author. They're thinking about writing, or they may be stuck on something, and there's no better way to learn than from someone who's gone before you. So if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you a few questions about your process. With that being said, when you were writing, did you find that you needed a particular environment? Did you need it to be quiet? Did you need to go off by yourself? Or could you write in the middle of the hustle and bustle of a regular day? What type of environment did you need?
Well, I need my environment to be quiet. I have some music playing, but essentially it's just me and the computer and the music. And I write the book from ideas that have occurred to me throughout the day. I have a little notebook that I carry around with me, so if I have something I think about or I want to write about, I'll write a sort of a short version in my notebook, and then when I come back to my my room with my computer and put it down. So it's a two-step process, basically. But I do need the quiet.
Now, did you find that there was a more productive time of day or night for you? Or did you kind of leave it open to when the inspiration hit you, you would write? Or were you more of a morning person, an evening person? How did that work out?
Well, I write pretty well any time during the day. And, sorry. But I wait for inspiration first. Something I think about, a particular message I want to put in there. I'll wait for that and then I'll write it. So it occurs any time of the day.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I have found that most authors will say the same, that they, of course, would write when the inspiration still hit them because they wanted to get that down. Why waste that for, productive time? But at the same time, there may have been times that just works for them, right? Now, for so many people, we hear this thing called writer's block, that they just get to the point where the ideas are no longer flowing for them. Some people have experienced it, some people have not. So my question to you is if you experienced that, what did you do to get yourself back in the flow?
Oh, okay. I don't know if that question necessarily applies to me because I'm not really a writer in the true sense of the word, that I write book after book after book. This is just a one book thing for me. I don't have any other books or any other projects that I have in mind. Like I said, it began to feel like a message from God. Now it's just that I had to get it down and write. So essentially, I don't have a writer's block because I have God there helping me out. So.
I see what you're saying. Yours was more of share this message as opposed to create these characters and try to get this storyline. So it's a little bit different for you. Totally understand that. Now, when it came to deciding upon a cover, now we've heard that old cliche, don't judge a book by its cover, but yet we know that a cover is a very important part of the book. For you, how did you determine what you wanted to include, exclude, the message that you wanted to convey when selecting your cover? What was that process?
Okay, well, that process actually was a collaborative effort between my publisher and myself. I came up with an initial design, cover design, which focused on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. I had envisioned a white, pearly tree as the good tree and a scraggly, dark, dying tree as the bad tree kind of thing. But they came out with a split vision idea, and I thought, oh, pretty good. So I incorporated that in the cover. The one side was the good tree, lots of fruit and green and all that. The other side was a dead tree, but still had fruit, right? So one represented the good tree, a good side of the tree, and the other represented the evil side of the tree. But that ended up in the back cover. The front cover was again a split vision, but I imagined a human face on one side and an alien face on the other. Alien in the sense of our classic alien with the big eyes and a big head and that kind of stuff. That's how it came.
How interesting. I love the discussion of coming up with the covers, and it is always such a beautiful collaboration when the author shares their vision and their view and what ends up being the final determination, because like you said, it does have to be that collaboration. It does have to be the sharing of ideas and getting the proper person to actually come up with your vision. I love it.
Yeah.
Now, if there was one bit of wisdom that you could give to someone else who is writing, and I understand that you may not write, this may be your final work, and I understand that. But for someone who is trying to determine whether or not they should step out into their author dreams, if they're trying to determine, is this really for me? Do you have any bits of wisdom for them or words of encouragement for them to continue until their project is completed?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is to learn grammar and be able to communicate your ideas in a succinct manner. There's lots of books out there where the authors can go on and on and on and fill up pages after pages of basically nothing, so if you want to communicate, and that's basically what you're doing when you're writing, you're communicating. You want to communicate it in as brief and as condensed a manner as possible, because power exists in words, but words have to be not overused, otherwise your power diminishes. The message you're spreading has no effect. So I would say that you have to learn to communicate in as succinctly as possible to be able to get the message across without a lot of flack or a lot of interference.
Boy, did you hit the nail on the head with that one. I have to agree with you. A lot of symposiums are like that as well, and the person just drones on and on. And you're like, wow, when is this going to end? And the same is true for a book. You end up putting it down, and you don't want to go back to it because it didn't capture your imagination. It didn't pull you along the path. So I have to agree with you with that. Well, Douglas King, thank you so much for coming on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela and spending time not only with me but with our listeners today. If you can, for one last time, can you remind everyone what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy, and how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the title of my book is An Innocent World, and you can get it through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, and you can contact me at my email address, Douglas B. King, the first, all one word, at gmail.com. Thank you.
I love it. Thank you again for being on. And listeners, thank you as well for spending time with us here today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to become your best self. As always, may the Lord continue to shine His face upon you. May you receive His grace and His mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember that you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.